It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
I can't believe I got to listen to that intro again. I went to sleep listening to that intro over and over and over and over and over again. Welcome to another edition of Rico Brogna, and let us explain, or let me try to explain. For those that didn't hear it last night, because there is a cleaner version of the Rico where you download your podcast, wherever you download your podcast. And again, thank you for subscribing and downloading Rico Brogna. You may not have heard this, but on the Sunday night edition of Rico Brogna, we were doing the podcast, and then all of a sudden that intro song that you heard with the voice of the great Zach Martin, who works at WFAN, and that Mets theme song started to play over and over and over again while we were doing the live version of the Rico. And unfortunately, Pete Hoffman was unavailable. He did me a huge favor by even pressing record to begin with. Sometimes that happens. Presses record and says, all right, do your thing. I got to go. And for whatever reason, that song kept playing over and over again. And I had to make a tough decision, a decision that has been ridiculed by many that I know. And that decision was, do you just give up and say, all right, this isn't working? Unfortunately, Pete's not around. I'm just going to stop the podcast. Or do you fight through it? Do you truck through it? And I have my reasons for why I trucked through it for 25 minutes. Number one, I kept thinking of the Mike Francesa theme song, in which he said, I'll get you the sports any way that I can. Remember that? He's Mike Francesa on the Fan. He'll get you the sports any way that he can. You know, that whole thing. So I was like, I got to get the Mets however I can. The Mets just won a big game against Chicago. We've got a huge, huge week coming up with the Yankees and the Subway Series, the Edwin Diaz ejection, which obviously had just happened not that long ago in that game. So I was like, I got to truck through it. And so I kept trucking through it every time that freaking intro played. And it started to make me laugh in my head because like you almost expect it to not play again and then it would play again. But then a part of me thought, you know, Hoff is so good with technology that eventually he's going to be able to deliver this podcast without the theme song playing over and over again, which, by the way, and Hoff, you got to answer this one because not that I have an issue with it. I don't have an issue with it. But we are going to be very honest before we talk Mets, and we will talk Mets. Trust me, we'll talk plenty of Mets, Yankees. We'll read your emails. We're going to do a full Rico. But there's no evidence of what happened because you deleted it. And I'm not, you didn't have to delete it on my part. Like the evidence of me trucking through that intro over and over again, it can live in history. I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I know. I thought that it was more annoying than anything else. I was like, who's going to want to go back and watch and listen? So I was like, I know the true Rico Brogna fans wanted to hear the actual episode. So that's why I pulled it down. And unfortunately, I got a lot of heat for that already. Not just from you, from other people saying, I wanted to watch it.
Yeah, I'm not giving you heat. I'm just saying you could have kept it. Like I certainly wasn't, you got to pull that down because you know what? The more I think about it, and I was explaining it to my wife this morning because she didn't fully understand it. And my oldest son, Jet, was hearing me have a conversation with a guy from Digital this morning about it. I got to hear what the hell you did for 25 minutes fighting through that theme song. And I got no evidence of it. So I don't know if there's any way that you can repost it as a very special Rico Brogna, but I am not against it. I am certainly not a fan of eliminating history. That's why I don't delete old tweets. I let all the tweets live forever because you know what? It happened. What can you do?
If I could, I wish I could. I mean, I have access to the audio that I know I have. I was looking and trying to rummage through to find the video, but I think it's officially done, and that's my own.
Wow.
I got
done forever.
Yes.
Would you like to release a public statement on what the hell happened before we
move
on?
So listen, all right, and I'll be very honest because we are very honest here on the Rico. We've always been very honest. I had a wonderful party yesterday as my 3 kids have all graduated from their respective classes. So we had a nice family party. And that continued late into the evening. And then I ran into my neighbor, who was also having a party for his daughter, who was graduating college. So we kind of went over there, and things got a little too. I had too much fun. Let's put it that way. I did listen. I knew that I was a little screwed up. I came over. I pressed the button. I do not understand to the life of me, and I appreciate you because you're like, dude, just press the button, go to bed, whatever it is, type of thing. And I pressed the button, and I basically went to bed. But I don't understand how 6 minutes into it, the music started again. That's still confusing me.
I have no idea, but I do want to thank Keith McPherson, who reached out in the middle of it to try to help. Sal Licata reached out and said, what the hell is going on? Anything I can do? But it was a fun time. I will read you this one email, and we'll get into the Mets. Stephen Cohen writes, I have created a Mount Rushmore of Ricos. How about that? A Mount Rushmore of Ricos. Number one, the one where you and Pete Hoffman drank. That was a year ago. The Drunk Rico, which, by the way, we are going to bring back. The Drunk Rico was very, very popular. And I'm going to make that a tradition because I was on vacation. And I like to do the Ricos even when I'm on vacation, as much as I possibly can, within reason. So I go down to North Carolina. I go down to a beach house every single year. And that's the perfect time for it. I'm watching the Mets, have a few drinks. The kids are sleeping. Let's go. So I can tell you that the Drunk Rico, which we gave you last August, will come back again. The second edition of the Drunk Rico. And I think they're on the West Coast, which is going to make it even drunkier. Like, I think that's going to make it the drunkest Rico of all time.
Last night was pretty drunk.
Well, good news. According to Steven, also on his Mount Rushmore of Ricos was the first ever Drive Home Live Rico, which I don't even recall which one that was. We'll give you 2 more Drive Home Ricos this week with the Subway Series. And then he only has 3 on the Mount Rushmore. The third was tonight, the theme night. I say let the music play all night long because apparently after I stopped, the intro kept going for 40 minutes. All right, we're done, okay? We gave you 8 minutes of that crap. Now let's get to what really matters, and that's the Mets as they get set for this 2-game series against the New York Yankees. First of all, some house cleaning. We'll start with Edwin Diaz. Edwin Diaz has been suspended for 10 games. He does have the right to appeal. No one has ever had this appeal overturned. You know, since the sticky stuff rule has gone into effect, no one has ever overturned it. And look, I actually remained pretty consistent with how I felt on Sunday night and how I felt on Monday doing the show with Tiki, which is I'm just kind of angry at the rules that Major League Baseball has. And to me, I look at using sticky stuff as driving a little bit above the speed limit. And in this case, when a reliever comes into the game, in this case, when Edwin Diaz comes into the game, you have a chance to tell that relief pitcher, hey, your hand's a little bit too sticky, go clean it. Because that person hasn't committed the crime yet. You haven't actually sped. You know, think about it. You're basically, if I'm going to keep the speeding analogy, it's almost as if the police officer is warning you before you get in your car, hey, don't go 60, it's a 50. Well, you haven't gone 60 yet. So in Edwin Diaz's case, he hasn't even thrown a warm-up pitch. So what I would hope for the future, not just because it affects our guys, and it affects our guys at a rate that is not, regular with Major League Baseball, is the third different Met that has faced this 10-game suspension, is you give that relief pitcher, much like they did with Clark Schmidt, much like they did with Domingo Germán, and much like they even did with Max Scherzer a year ago, you give them a chance to wipe their hands. That's number one. I'm still kind of annoyed at Major League Baseball. Number two, and let's address it right now, Carlos Mendoza was not angry. He did not give you the passionate defense of Edwin Diaz, which leads you to a few potential conclusions. Number one, he knows he broke the rule. I mean, that could be it. Carlos could have said, what the hell am I going to fight about? If you think back, I'll give you a Yankee example from a day ago. Did you guys see Juan Soto strike out on a pitch right down the middle? He was looking to call timeout. He was looking to call timeout. He never got timeout. He stepped out. Joe Jimenez threw a ball right down the middle, strike 3, good night. And Soto was pissed. Soto was arguing. Aaron Boone came out And we didn't get your typical angry Aaron Boone. It was more, all right, Juan. Okay, Juan. Okay, Juan. Okay, Juan. So I don't know if it's similar in that Carlos Mendoza's like, all right, you know what? You broke the freaking rule. I mean, he didn't passionately defend him after the game as well. Now, it could also be one of those things where you know it's not going anywhere. You know he's already ejected. You know he's going to serve a 10-game suspension. And I wonder, because this is damaging. It was damaging last year when Drew Smith got suspended for 10 games. It was damaging with Max Scherzer. I wonder if inside the organization, they're just pissed off at the guy saying, come on, you know better. You can't have your hand that sticky. But then again, if his hand is as sticky as it's always been, what are we talking about? If his hand is as tacky, we'll use that word instead, as it always is, then what are we talking about? Here's what I know, because I don't want to relitigate this issue over and over again. Here's what I know. Here's what you know. The New York Mets are going to have to play 10 baseball games, 10, not 10 days, 10 baseball games in which their closer is not available. And what makes it worse than just Edwin Diaz not being available, which is bad enough, is the Mets, who do not get a lot of innings from their starting pitching, are now going to have to pitch with an old-fashioned 25-man roster and 12 arms on their staff and not 13. And that's a problem. And that's a problem because let's take a look at the teams you're about to play: the New York Yankees, the Houston Astros, and the Washington Nationals, and then one game against the Pirates. But it's also going to be a big challenge for this bullpen, and it's going to be a big challenge for this rotation. I put a little bit of this and the pressure of the next 10 days on the rotation. The more outs you get from your starting pitching, the deeper into a game you can get from your starters, the less you're going to have to rely on everybody in this bullpen. I would not name a closer. I don't think you should name a closer. I think it's a situational, game-by-game basis. That's how you got to handle it. There may be a night in which Jake Diekman is getting the last out or two. There may be a night, maybe most nights, when Reed Garrett is asked to get the final few outs. It seems like Adam Ottavino is out of the circle of trust with the way Mendy has used him his last few appearances. So I'd say Deadnail Nunez may get the opportunity to get some big outs. I hate to say this, don't get mad at me. Drew Smith is going to be asked to get some big outs. So this is going to be about everybody stepping up. And more than just each individual reliever, like I said, they're going to need their rotation to step up. They're going to need to get quality starts with Edwin Diaz being out. Again, you lose the spot on your roster. I mentioned this briefly on yesterday's Rico. You may or may not have heard it because there was music in the background. And that is one of the moves I would make is I'd call up Christian Scott. I'd probably have him enter the rotation early next week, would be my guess, if I'm situating this thing well. Actually, I'd have him enter the rotation over the weekend. Let me correct myself. David Peterson is pitching Tuesday against the Yankees. Sean Manaea is pitching Wednesday against the Yankees. Then they have an off day, another off day. And that's it for a while. So that's the other problem. 8 games in this suspension is going to come without off days being built around it. And why that's a big deal is if you get performances from Reed Garrett and Deadnail Nunez on a night basis or a 2-night in a row basis, you're not going to have them for the third night. So unfortunately, these off days come at a bad time. So again, Peterson, Manaea for these 2 games against the Yankees. Jose Quintana is scheduled to pitch on Friday, a week off. I'd bump up Severino to Saturday, which would give him just 1 extra day. And then on Sunday, I'd either go with Christian Scott or I'd go with David Peterson. That means Tyler McGill is out of the rotation. And I know that's going to make a lot of Met fans happy, but my thinking behind it is not squarely bump him out of the rotation. I don't think Tyler McGill has been nearly as bad as the way some of my fellow Met fans have described. He had a terrible start. I mean, I'm not denying that, but we're acting like Tyler McGill is a non-competitive mess every time he's out there. That's not true. That's not me loving Tyler McGill. That's just me being real with Tyler McGill. Either way, we're on the same page. I get him out of the rotation. And that's one of the adjustments I make because now I've got 2 arms in my bullpen that are long relievers. And I think you're going to need that. I think you're going to need that for 2 reasons. You're going to need that because, A, if you do get a quick start from a Quintana on a Friday night, or from Minaya on Wednesday, or even Severino over the weekend. You do not, when you're pitching with a short bullpen, have to use too many relievers that you're going to need in a closer game. So you use Hauser or McGill to maybe eat up 3, 4, dare I say 5 innings. That can save you a lot. But besides that, I kind of want to see McGill out of the bullpen. You know, we tried to answer that question a week ago. I think someone emailed, who do you have more faith in long-term in this rotation, Tyler McGill and David Peterson? And my answer at the time is none of the above. I don't really love the idea of either guy being in the rotation long-term, but I'm intrigued by both guys out of the bullpen. And what I would do, even though without any off days, maybe the thinking would be to go to a 6-man rotation. I don't think the Mets could afford to go to a 6-man rotation. Not when you're pitching one arm short out of the bullpen. Because remember, if you go to a 6-man rotation under normal circumstances, you have one less guy in your bullpen. The most pitchers you can carry are 13. So if you got 6 starters, that leaves you with 7 bullpen arms. Well, in this case, with Diaz serving a suspension, that only leaves you with 6 bullpen arms. Now, you can play with the roster a little bit. Remember, Tyler McGill has options. So that's the other possibility where you send him down, you call up Scott, and you kind of play the options game to get yourself fresh arms. And I think they're going to have to do that, though the only guy, if memory serves correct, outside of McGill, I think Peterson has options too, but outside of McGill that has options is Danny Young, who they can go up and down with. But they're going to have to get very creative in maximizing these arms because they're short. And this is what really bothered me about this ejection and what subsequently happened. It's not just losing Edwin Diaz, and that's bad enough. It's the idea that you're now going to have to pitch short for an extended period of time. And that's what the Mets are going to have to deal with now for 10 days. All right, number 2, the other house cleaning we got to get to is Starling Marte. Mike Puma's already reported, basically, he's going on the injured list. He's going to have to rest his knee for 15 days, which sounds like he's not coming back in 15 days, but it sounds like the Mets are going to be without Starling Marte. You want me to guess off the top? I'd say it's a month. And I'm almost surprised that it took this long for that to happen with Starling Marte. He's actually been a very productive player this season, offensively, while he's been a mess defensively. But it feels like Marte is an injury waiting to happen. It also feels like he hasn't been 100% all season long. But we have seen a more productive Starling Marte than we did a year ago. He isn't quite the guy he was in 2022, but he has the batting average up to 278, had the OPS up to 750. He's hit for a little bit of pop. He's been perfect on the base paths, 12 for 12, and they're going to miss him. And the big reason why they're going to miss him is, and let's play this game off, who do you want playing right field every day? Because I'll give you the options. We can go over the options. And before we jump to who they're going to call up, here are your internal right now options. Number 1, DJ Stewart. Do you want DJ Stewart every day in right field?
No.
He says no. All right. Option number 2, Tyrone Taylor, who drove in those 13 runs in April and I think he's driven in 1 run in the last 2 months. You want Tyrone Taylor?
Not really, no.
All right. Option number 3, do you want Jose Iglesias? Because, hear me out on this, what you end up doing, because Jeff McNeil's been the everyday second baseman. As much as we don't like that, he has been. You can say, all right, Jeff, you've been given a stay of execution, if you will. You're going to continue to play, but now you're going to play right field. And Jose Iglesias is going to play second base. That's another way you can get around this right field issue. Do you like option number 3?
No, I really don't.
Okay, before we get to the minor leaguers, of those 3 options, DJ Stewart, Tyrone Taylor, and the Iglesias McNeil thing I just described, who would you prefer getting the bulk of the at-bats with Starling Marte out?
I would have to go with, and this is so terrible, I would probably go with McNeil.
I agree.
I hate that, but that's where I'd go.
I think I would go with that. And look, it's not one answer because obviously you play the matchups and you play the hotness game. You know, DJ Stewart starts to get hot. He can get himself a few at-bats. Same with Tyrone Taylor. I like Iglesias defensively at second base. You see the quick hands that he has. He's so much faster turning that double play as compared to Jeff McNeil. And I don't think Jeff McNeil's a bad defensive second baseman. Let's separate the offense from the defense for a second. And I think Jose Iglesias has earned the opportunity to play. And look, we could just say play him over Jeff McNeil and treat right field as a separate issue. That's fine. You could do that too. The problem is there aren't a lot of great options. But if we start to expand the options, if we start to think bigger, then I think we could all get on the same page. And it's not Trace Thompson, okay? It's not him. It's not the kid they just claimed off waivers from the Chicago White Sox, Duke Ellis, I think is his name, who's a speedster, who's like, actually, this guy Duke Ellis, is it Duke Ellis? It's Duke something. It's a badass name. Let's just be honest. Like, a guy like Duke Ellis should be damn good just because, he's got a chance to be awesome. Yeah, Duke Ellis, that's his name. Duke Ellis has a chance when rosters expand in September at being a really cool weapon because he's a major stolen base threat. He's this lean left-handed bat. He's a center fielder. He steals a crap ton of bases. They just claimed him off waivers, so he's on their 40-man roster. I mean, to make the transactions easy, they could call him up. They could. Now, that's not a guy who should play every day. That's not a guy who's earned a chance to play every day, but it's certainly a weapon, and it's something different. So that's option. That's an option. Calling up Trace Thompson, sure, that's an option. Calling up Luke Ritter, sure, that's an option. Calling up Rylan Bannon, sure, that's an option. But I think what intrigues Pete Hoffman and what intrigues me and what intrigues most people listening is rewarding somebody who's been hot for the last couple of weeks, even if his overall numbers don't speak to you quite yet. And maybe it's time to say, you know what? Let's give you a taste of the major leagues to Luis Angel Acuna. And I think I'm with everybody else. That would be what I would do. Is it rushing the kid? I don't know. I mean, the only thing I can tell you about Luis Angel Acuna is what we all know, which is watching the box scores every day and seeing a guy that's been very productive over the last month, a guy who's played a little second base, a guy who's played a little bit of outfield. And by the way, he can do both here. And I would treat this as, you know what? You've played well for a month. We have an opening. Let's give you that opportunity to play at the major league level. And if it doesn't work, it's not the end of the world. Doesn't make him a failed prospect. I don't get overly worried about, it's going to hurt his trade value. No, I think it's more rewarding a guy who's played well. And also for us as Met fans, giving us an opportunity to see something young, youthful, and exciting get those at-bats with Marte out and Jeff McNeil struggling.
And the reason why I love it too is if they go that route, kid with a job. If he plays, whether it's second base or outfield or whatever they situate him at, if he performs well, he's never going to get sent down again. Like that's it. We've solved our problem. And again, the burst of energy that we saw from a couple of years ago when Beatty got called up, Vientos, when Alvarez got called up, it for the fans, it's great, but I think for the team, you need that burst of energy too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm intrigued by him. I think we all are. He's a top prospect, and he's close. Look, the one thing I don't know is where he is defensively, if they feel he's ready to be that major league outfielder or major league second baseman. Remember, Luis Angel Acuna, very similar to Jet Williams, shortstop by trade, learning other positions. The other option, and maybe it's the likelier option, is Brett Beatty. Do the Mets feel like Brett Beatty can come up here and play a little bit of second base? And again, that falls into that same line I described with Jeff McNeil playing a lot more outfield, which I've talked about for a while. Like, I'm not big on, hey, Jeff McNeil sucks, DFA him. Okay? I think it's more, let's change his role. Let's just treat him like a different baseball player. And one of the ways he can be different is being that super utility player. That's one of the values that Jeff McNeil has. Now, if he's hitting 210, he doesn't have a lot of value. I mean, you have to hit a little bit. But he's always been, to me, a decent enough outfielder and I think a very above average defensive second baseman. I wouldn't say Glow Glover, but I always thought he has played like, I guess there are aspects of his defense I like and don't like. I don't think he's great at turning the double play. I don't think he's great at feeling that contact on double plays. I don't think he's got the quickest hands in the world, but he makes some great plays defensively at second base. He made that game-saving play a couple weeks ago. So maybe calling him above average isn't fair. I don't know what the hell I would call him. I would call him decent at second base. He's fine at second base. So the other option is Brett Beatty, where you bring him up. He's the bat that replaces Marte. He plays a little bit more second base, and Jeff McNeil plays the outfield. If I had to power rank them, I would probably go Luis Angel Acuna number 1, Brett Beatty number 2. And look, part of my ideas with Beatty was sending down DJ Stewart and getting Brett Beatty up here. But I think you do need more experienced outfielders. So I don't think you're going to do both. I don't think DJ's gone. Marte's on the IL, and up comes both Brett Beatty and Luis Angel Acuna.
Yeah, but
keep an eye on that. Mets have a decision to make going into Tuesday.
The one thing is, and I hate to say this and be this guy, but DJ Stewart has no role in this team anymore. I'm sorry. I know that Marte is going to be out for who knows how long, but his role is so limited, and he doesn't even do what he's supposed to do well when he does get the opportunity. It's time to end the DJ Stewart, experiment. It really is. It's time to end it.
Let's take a couple of your emails. We'll get into the Subway Series coming up, Subway Series memories and our thoughts on these two games at Citi Field between the Mets and the Yankees. Speaking of Jeff McNeil, Ethan writes, Jeff McNeil issue. I've been listening for a few years. Admittedly, I'm usually an overly optimistic Met fan, and Jeff, like many of us, was one of the top dogs on the 2022 season. As much as I agree with your point to treat him like a bench player, we should just give the guy an ovation. It works so well with Lindor, and we have nothing to lose. Jeff's game is so predicated on emotion, and he gets so down on himself, I could see him at least returning to serviceable MLB player. I'm down to ditch McNeil, but until Acuna or Mauricio or Beatty are ready, there's no reason to not give it a shot. I mean, this ovation thing that started with the Phillies a year ago is so annoying. Let's give him a standing ovation. That'll really get him going. I don't think it's going to make any difference. David Marder writes, Evan and Hoff, we all know who said something about Edwin Diaz. It's Tomas Nido. It's not a coincidence. Tiki Barber doesn't believe in those coincidences. This was never an issue until someone who caught him many times in the past is on the opposing team. So I mentioned this a little bit on the air today too, this theory that Tomas Nido is the rat. If he is, I don't blame him. I mean, you go to another team, what are you supposed to do? Yeah, like you may as well try to give your team like some kind of edge. Joe writes, MLB loves this. I watched the postgame after Edwin Diaz got tossed. Why are the other guys on other teams allowed to wash their hands after getting checked? Why are the Mets the target of MLB when it comes to this? And why does Carlos Mendoza refuse to defend his players? MLB has technology that instantly tells you how many revolutions a pitch has that was thrown a half a second ago, but to measure sticky stuff on guys' hands, we're playing patty cake, Baker's man. Excuse me. If rosin is legal, how is too much rosin illegal? What is too much? And how are we measuring it? Between ejecting all-star closers on Sunday Night Baseball and walk-off pitch clock violations, this joke of a commissioner is ruining the game. Rob Manfred is thrilled that this is all happening. This is not what the game should be about. The walk-off pitch clock violation, which finally happened. I remember Pete being the brigade on this of, what are you going to say when there's a walk-off pitch clock violation? Well, you guys finally got your wish in the Colorado game. There was a walk-off pitch clock violation. But if I'm correct on this, the bases were loaded with nobody out. I don't know if it was 3-0. It may have been 3-1 or 3-2. And the pitcher committed a pitch clock violation. Here's what I say. Don't commit a violation. The pitch clock is not something, and we're a year and a half into this, that annoys me in any way. And I wonder if you guys who are anti-pitch clock have finally gotten on board and said, you know what? It really isn't that big of a deal. And we don't see violations ending games. That was a rarity. But I do agree with you about the enforcement of sticky stuff. It's just, it feels arbitrary. And look, I'm not a conspiracy guy. I don't think they're targeting the New York Mets, but they have had 3 suspensions over the last year. That's just a fact. I mean, Max Scherzer Drew Smith, and now Edwin Diaz. And considering it's not like 100 guys have been suspended, I think it's only 8 or 9. It does feel like it's not fair. Clayton writes, who's the closer moving forward? Nunez, Garrett, Committee. Also, these next 10 games are crucial. Should they trade Quintana or another starter ASAP and get a good reliever? Quintana hasn't gone deep into too many games, and they're going to need length in the next 10 days without the extra arm. Only this organization. I swear to God. That's Clayton. So I have said before that the Mets could do targeted selling. And I even equated a few Ricos ago to what I did in fantasy last year, where you're still trying to win, but you're selling guys off. And I mentioned that with the starting pitching because they have a bunch of guys on one-year deals. And they also have a depth of starting pitching, as crazy as it is to think. I mean, Jose Budo and Christian Scott deserve to be in the major leagues. Blade Tidwell is not that far away. Joey Lucchesi, you could argue, deserves to be in the major leagues. And I fail to mention this guy's name because I don't take it seriously until he's closer. But you do have Kodai Senga apparently on his way back. So the Mets could, as he suggested, trade a Sean Manaea or a Jose Quintana, even a Luis Severino, and get back prospects. But he brings up an interesting idea. And I'll tell you why I can buy it and I can see it. And that is, would the Mets be able to trade one of their surplus starting pitchers for a relief pitcher? So if you look at the standings right now in Major League Baseball, and I'll include the American League in this too, how many teams are out of it? Like, really out of it. Like, come on, they're dead. In the National League, to me, there are only 2 teams, the Miami Marlins and the Colorado Rockies. That's it. Lost 5 in a row, and that may continue. They may sink a little bit further. But as of right now, it's Miami and Colorado. That's it. The Giants, the Reds, the Cubs, the Pirates, the Mets, the Diamondbacks, the Nationals, the Padres, the Cardinals, the Braves, all within 3 games of take the Braves out. All the other teams I mentioned, all within 3 games of a wild card spot. So you only have 2 teams as of right now. Yes, that can change, that you would look at and say, hey, okay, those are the sellers. In the American League, right now, you're really only talking about 3. Again, that number can change, but it's the Chicago White Sox, the Oakland Athletics, and the Los Angeles Angels. That's it. Are the Blue Jays on their way? Sure. Are the Tigers potentially on their way? Absolutely. So right now, you're talking about 5 teams in Major League Baseball that are real sellers. So those are the 5 teams that could sell pieces off. If you are the Mets and name the random in the race team, could we see trade deadline deals like we very rarely see, which is player for player, need for need? We're a team that is desperate for starting pitching, but maybe feels like they have a surplus of bullpen arms. Make that kind of deal with the Mets where, hey, you're getting Jose Quintana and the Mets are getting, name the guy. Colin Holderman. Bring him back from Pittsburgh. But I don't think that's crazy. Now, I'm going to do my own research over the next couple of days and weeks to look at, all right, well, what are the fits? Like, because right now I'm just giving it to you as a theory, repeating what our guy emailed. And I do think that could make sense in this day and age. In the past, it's always been, I'm going to sell this guy off. And very rarely do you see player for player deals at the trade deadline. There's a few that jump out at me. The A's and the Red Sox made the John Lester, Yoenis Cespedes trade. That's an example. But there aren't a lot. You don't see a lot of that where you're literally making a deal. And that could make sense if the Mets could find a team that's desperate for starting pitching that'd be willing to trade a good young, and here's the key, controllable arm. Because otherwise the Mets may say, screw it, I'd rather get prospects. Yeah, we're trying to win this year, but I'm not going to trade Jose Quintana for a reliever. But if it's a reliever that you've got control over for the next 3 years, that you think is pretty good, that can be a part of this bullpen for a few years, it could make sense. It could make sense in theory. Now let's get to this Subway Series. Here's the way I view these games against the New York Yankees. I care. I think we all care. I will be at Citi Field for both games. We're doing shows out there, which is very cool. We haven't done shows at Citi Field in over a decade, so that is great. And I thank SNY. I thank the Yankees I thank the Mets. That'll be a lot of fun. And of course, I guess our radio station. The Yankees against the Mets, as crazy as this sounds, are less impactful on us making the playoffs than what we just saw this weekend. And that's just backed up by the reality of math and the reality of, hey, tiebreakers actually do matter, as unlikely as you may think they are for ever happening. The Yankees and Mets do not compete for the same playoff spots. So that part is true. It's obvious, and I mean that. With that said, when I'm in the building for Mets Yankees and there are 25,000 Yankee fans, maybe less, 15,000 Yankee fans screaming at the top of their lungs, let's go Yankees, yeah, the whole thing, obviously the game comes with more meaning. And so in the moment, and I think you'll hear this in the post-game reactions we'll do a couple of drive homes on Tuesday night and Wednesday night, assuming we don't have any technical difficulties, which you never know. I'm driving back from Citi Field. You never know what's going to happen, but you'll see it. Obviously, I care. Obviously, they feel like bigger games than your typical regular season game against a division rival or a team in your own league. Two things can be true in my mind. I can, with a straight brain, tell you at the end of the day, these games don't matter that much. They matter in the standings. They all do. But really, is beating the Yankees going to make that big of a difference in our lives? And the answer is, for a day it will, and then it goes away. And here's the exercise I wanted to do. Sometimes I prepare on the Rico and I write some crap down. And sometimes preparing is actually a negative. And I'm going to tell you right now why it is. I didn't write down my favorite Subway Series memories. I didn't rekindle my brain by saying, oh, yeah, I forgot about that. Let me write that one down. Off the top of my head, I'm going to tell you my most memorable Subway Series memories. And you're going to notice something about this. And I bet you if Pete does this, the same thing will happen. And I bet if anybody listening does this, the same thing will happen. All of your memories of the Subway Series will be from a long time ago. They're not going to be from last year. I don't remember last year. I mean, I think, so Max Scherzer took a crap on the mound. I do remember that. Drew Smith got suspended. I saw the death of the season in my dad's eyes. I do remember that. But outside of that, I don't remember. I don't. I think back to a year earlier, 2022, when the Mets and Yankees were both. I honestly don't remember. I'm racking my brain to think about what happened. I guess we split with them. I don't know. 2021, the only memory I have is that with the Mets, my seat just fell. With the Mets, basically falling out of it late in September, they had a September series against the Yankees. It was the anniversary of September 11th. They lost on that Saturday night. It was a very emotional night. I think Aaron Judge hit a home run. And then on Sunday, Francisco Lindor hit 3 home runs, yippity-doo-dah. And the Mets and the Yankees, they barked at each other. I remember that. I remember from 2020, the only thing I can remember, and this one is just because it was so weird, was Ahmed Rosario hitting the game-winning home run at Yankee Stadium as a Met, and Steve Cohen officially buying the team. 2019, I got nothing. No idea. 2018, I got nothing. I don't remember any of this. Jacob deGrom made his major league debut against the New York Yankees in 2014. That was a decade ago. So they matter in the moment. I'm not telling you they don't. It's an event in the moment. The tickets are red hot. I'm going to be there for all those games. So I usually don't go to back-to-back games anymore with kids and a wife, but I'll go to back-to-back games for Mets Yankees. So I don't know if this proves I'm a hypocrite. I'm just describing how, yes, in the moment, it's a big deal. In the moment, it feels like the World Series. In the moment, it's a playoff game. In the moment, man, I want to shut these Yankee fans up and all that crap. But then when it's over, win or lose, it's like, okay. Ask yourself this. If the Mets win these 2 games, we'd be at 500. We'd be ecstatic. When we get to Friday, are we still thinking about beating the Yankees? When this Subway Series first started in the late 90s, early 2000s, yeah. I would take those Yankee wins and run with them. So I'm going to give you off the top of my head, without writing it down, the 5 most memorable Subway Series moments. Now, memorable doesn't have to be a win. I learned that with my book, My Mets Bible, on sale now. I picked 81 games. They were not all wins. They were memorable. Number 1 is the Matt Franco game. And by the way, I'm not including the World Series. I apologize. Because that's just cheating. That's not the Subway Series. That's the World Series. That's far different. So number 1 for me, Matt Franco game. That was pound for pound, just one of the great regular season games you'll ever see. Back and forth. Posada hits a home run. Piazza hit a ball that Howie Rose, I think, has jokingly said is the first home run in the history of Citi Field because he hit it so far it went over where Citi Field is now. Everything about that game still kind of rains into my eyes. You know, I still think about it. Mariano Rivera basically striking out Matt Franco on an 0-2 pitch that the umpire missed. And then right after that, line drive, right field, base hit. Paul O'Neill comes up throwing 2-run score. And what I will always remember about that day is that when me and my dad were driving home after that game, we made sure to put on the Yankee version of the postgame show because we wanted to taste the tears of John Sterling. That's how childish I was, you know, in 2000 as a 1999, not 2000, 1999 as a 16-year-old or whatever I was. So that's number 1. Number 2, the Dave Malicki game, the first ever Subway Series game back in 1997. If you are younger than 35, I guess would be the cutoff. I don't know if you realize how weird that was. Because imagine for so many years how the Mets and the Yankees had just no involvement with each other. I mean, it was a fake rivalry. You think it's fake now. I mean, we're talking about they never played each other. They played each other in Mayor's Trophy games. I don't even know how you could take that seriously. An exhibition game before the season started. So when they were playing for the very first time in 1997, it was so unique. It was so weird to even think about. Wow, the Mets are going to play the Yankees. And the buildup to that first series was enormous, man. It lasted for weeks. I remember Met fans chanting Yankees suck at Shea Stadium in the weeks leading up to that series. And that first game, it's like your first time, you'll never forget it, was just shockingly amazing. Having Dave Malicki completely shut down the Yankees, striking out Derek Jeter on that bendy curveball to end it. The Mets stealing a run in the first inning. They executed, I think it was a double steal and a steal of home. Shocking. So that's number 2. I'm at 2 now? Yeah. Number 3, and this is probably the most recent one, the Luis Castillo game, 2009, because that was the period of time now. I think it was pretty much from 03 on. You know, so 97 to 02, 03, you kind of had all those memories, how could you forget this? But 09 is so unique because how do you lose a game like that? Yeah, I think to myself, if the Mets had lost that game to the Braves, what would we remember it all these years later? And the answer is kind of not quite like the Yankees because it was the Yankees, but you kind of would. And what hits me the most when I think back to that, the Luis Castillo drop, was I kept saying in the seat at Yankee Stadium that night, I wrote about this in my book too, I kept saying, I can't believe they did it again. Because this was so soon after Ryan Church missed third base in LA, which was such a demoralizing loss as a fan to lose a game like that. And now you're losing a game in arguably a worse way because Ryan Church touches third base. Great, the Mets have a lead. Maybe they win, maybe they don't. Who the hell knows, right? Dodgers could still come back. In this case, if he catches the baseball, the game is over. If he doesn't, you lose. Mainly because Mark Teixeira was hustling. So that is just Number 4, Doc Gooden. Doc Gooden making his return to Shea Stadium and doing it as a New York Yankee. And not dominating by any stretch, but pitching just well enough to beat the New York Mets in the first game of the 2-stadium doubleheader. And then you got the second one, which is Roger Clemens drilling Mike Piazza in the head. And my last regular season Subway Series memory that jumps out the most at me, and this is a weird one, was the first time the Mets and the Yankees ever played at Shea Stadium. It was on a Friday night in 1998, And Bobby Valentine made this horrific managerial decision to go to Mel Rojas to face Paul O'Neill. It was such a stupid decision. And I recall just cursing out Bobby Valentine during that entire commercial break at the game. I was at Shea with my dad. How do you go to Rojas against O'Neill? What are you doing? Like, I am so pissed off. And maybe a part of me is so pissed off thinking, oh, I'm going to be wrong, right? Mel's going to make a big play and we're going to get out of this. And on the first pitch, O'Neill hit a ball to left center field. I'm like, no, come on. This ain't getting out. And it goes over the fence for a game-winning home run. And it was just it was the worst feeling in the world. It's such a sick feeling when, as a fan, you hate a move, you don't want a move to happen, and then the move happens, and it couldn't possibly backfire in any worse of a way. And I'm leaving out a bunch because in the 97 through 2002 era, I think I could, off the top of my head, recite everything that happened in any one of those games. You know, Steve Beezer drawing the balk, and then Tino Martinez getting the game winner in game 3 of that first Subway Series. The Mets winning the finale of the 98 Subway Series after they lost the first 2 games. Luis Lopez hit a sacrifice fly, and then Brian McRae somehow went off first base and almost ran himself into an incredibly dumb double play. 99, they lose the first 2 games at Yankee. They win the Sunday night game where they stop Roger Clemens' win streak. They stop Derek Jeter's getting on base streak. And that was right after Steve Phillips fired all of Bobby Valentine's coaches. Then you got winning on the Friday night. Piazza takes Clemens deep at Shea. Matt Franco game on Saturday. Hideki Arabu beats the Mets on Sunday afternoon to salvage the final game of the series. Then in 2000, you've got, 2000, I'm trying to remember. I actually don't remember the 2 games at Yankee Stadium. I just remember the rain out on Sunday night. David Cohn was pitching, had like a 6 ERA. Yanks had an early lead against Mike Hampton. The rains came. Robin Ventura, jumps on the tarpaulin, if you will. And then they made that game up in the Roger Clemens Beans Piazza in the head game. And then I guess in 2001, I start to forget. So really, it goes up until the Subway World Series. But there is no denying we are now 27 years into the Subway Series. They sell out every game. It's a rarity for the Mets and the Yankees to not be sold out. So despite it being old, despite it being 27 years of Subway Series, the fact they played in the World Series all the way back in 2000, it's lost its luster, sure, but it hasn't lost its luster enough to where they're not selling that game out, or at least coming really, really close to selling those games out. And Howie Rose was on with us. We were tributing Howie Rose on Monday. You can definitely go back, take a listen to the podcast. I'm sure there's clips on YouTube about it as well. And Howie made a comment, when we weren't talking about his career, he made a comment about how he thinks in the next 5 years, baseball is going to expand the playoffs again, and we're going to get radical realignment. And we're going to get the Mets and the Yankees in the same division. We've done podcasts about this. I'm against it. I know there's a lot of people out there who actually disagree with me, and they're like, oh, it'd be great. Mets and Yankees in the same division. This is amazing. I wonder if they played 13 times, so Mets Yankees became a division rival, would we still get the sellout every single game? We still do. I know they only play 2 games at Citi, 2 games at Yankee Stadium, so it's still unique, but it's every year, and we have not run into that spot of them not selling games out. So hopefully we don't see that someday, because that means they're in the same division. That's not something I definitely don't want to see it, but we do have the Subway Series upon us. And yes, I want to win. I don't want to lose to the freaking Yankees. Hoff, what is your most special Subway Series memory?
Unfortunately, I think the Castillo one sticks out the most, but I thought you would have named like the Carlos Delgado 9 RBI game. I mean, that was actually a good moment for the Mets. I know it's kind of the tail end of Carlos Delgado as a ball player too, but he showed a little spark, which is nice.
Yeah, that was a 2-stadium doubleheader as well. Like the third time they did it, because they've had 2-stadium doubleheaders. I think they've done it, how many times? 3 times now. They did the one I talked about in 2000. They did another one in like 2003 while I was living in Maryland. And I think that was the year where the Yankees won all 6 games. And then the one you're talking about was '07 or '08. I think it was 2008 when they did that between Shea Stadium and Yankee Stadium. Yeah, I remember it. I'll give you that. It's just, I don't know. I think after 2002, it becomes very, I don't know if it means as much. Now, maybe if the Mets win a game, and look, they've had comebacks. David Wright got the game winning against Mariano Rivera in 2006. They had a great rally a couple of years ago. So they've had some dramatic wins against the Yankees. But I don't know why. I guess it just doesn't stick the same the way it used to.
Well, I mean, you kind of nailed it. It's like back in the day, we had something to like brag about because we weren't winning World Series, we weren't going to the playoffs. So it was like, oh, we beat the Yankees. It was like the one piece that we had over Yankee fans. And I'm not trying to say it's always a Yankee Met thing, but in this case, it actually is. That's it. It's like you go face to face, a mano, and that's what you get to hold your hat upon. It doesn't make a difference if you make the playoffs or the World Series. I was able to beat you head to head, and I get to beat you for a day, and that's
yes. Yes. By the way, if the Mets win on Tuesday night, I'm sure I'll talk about this on the Rico. I will get a lot of, and you will get a lot of, if you're a Met fan, going, that's your World Series. Enjoy your World Series. That's your World Series. Have a good World Series. Boy, I can't wait. The Subway Series is a lot of fun. Let me read some of your emails, and we'll get the hell out of here. And like I mentioned, we'll do Ricos after both games, live drive home Ricos. Danny writes, with the talk of the Mets may sell starters and still try to compete out there, I'm going a slightly different route with one of our expiring starting pitchers. I'm talking about signing Luis Severino to an extension right now. 3 years, $60 million. What do you think of the idea and what the numbers would be? I've had this thought for a while and finally figured I'd send it in as I sit here watching him deal so far against the Chicago Cubs. Not as important, but can SNY remove the SNY the app logo on the top right of the screen? By now, we all have the app from Danny. They're not going to remove it. SNY wants to promote their app, and I don't think everybody has the app quite yet. But you know what? For you, I'll bring it up live on the air and see what they say. I think the contract you laid out, sure, why not? But I think Luis Severino, having the year he's having, is probably going to want to see it through. Get to free agency, because if he makes 30 starts and he pitches to a mid-3 ERA, Corbin Burns is certainly going to be the premier guy in free agency. But I think Sevy's going to say, why can't I get $100 million? And that's where I think this offseason is going to be so fascinating if you're the Mets. And I think that one of the positives, and I said this before the Mets started winning, so one of the positives prior to the turnaround was that I felt better, and you probably felt better about the state of their pitching moving forward than we thought coming into the season. Because I think there was a thought of, all right, you got all these guys on one-year deals. Boy, the Mets are going to have to go out. They're going to have to sign like 3 or 4 starting pitchers as free agents. But I think when you look at Christian Scott, when you look at Jose Budo, when you look at those kinds of performances, you say to yourself, oh, well, we actually do have some young arms. Oh, Blake Tidwell's coming. Brandon Sprout's coming. Oh, maybe we only need to sign 1 guy or 2 guys. Obviously, Kodai Senga is under contract, but I'd like to see him pitch to give us confidence about his availability moving forward. So I think if you can get it, and Sevy's obviously the guy that I think we look at as probably the guy you'd most want to bring back of the expiring pitchers, but I'm not sure he would accept a 3-year, $60 million deal. Would I? And I have been pretty consistent that no matter how good Luis Severino is, I'd let him walk. Yeah, I'd let him walk because I'm not giving him $100 million. If Luis Severino and his agent are like, man, I don't want to leave New York. I had great success here. I like it here. I like my time with the Yankees. I love my time with the Mets. Get it done. And he's willing to take that kind of contract. Sure. I got no problem with a 3-year deal. But I think with the kind of season he's having, he's expecting a lot more. You can always email the pod, thericob@gmail.com, thericob@gmail.com, or you can leave us a voicemail at 725-222-8699, 725-222-8699. After each Subway Series game, we'll do a live drive-home edition of the Rico. So make sure you're listening to that. And me and Tiki, we're heading out to Citi Field. We're going to do remotes on Tuesday and Wednesday, live from the Cadillac Club. And I will tell you, Met fans, Carlos Mendoza will join the program 3 o'clock on Tuesday. So we look forward to that. Thank you very much for listening, downloading, and subscribing. A cleaner edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.